Good morning. We are back with, I haven't done this in a while, another chronicle of the shitster. The subject this week, Kyle Busch's 200th win. Ooh. Personally, Petty's and Kyle Busch's are different. Petty had all of his wins in the Cup Series basically matter. While Kyle had 93 Xfinity wins, 54, 53 Xfinity wins, 93 truck wins, and 54 Cup wins. I mean, that's impressive that he's got that in all three series, but the difference here is it's not all in the three series. Did Jeff Gordon go back into the truck series to beat freaking Mike Skinner and Jack Sprague's ass every week? No, he did not. Did Mark Martin do it? No, he did not. It's ego. Like, we already know you're one of the greats, yet you keep double dipping like it's Chip and Salsa into the minor leagues and winning. I mean, good lord. This isn't when it's like when Pete Rose, when he's the all-time hit king, they kept demoting him to Double A every single day just to play in Double A before he went back to the big leagues and got a 3 for 4. Like, it's just dumb. You don't count that up. I mean, we're in a position here where you don't know and you can't understand the logic of people saying, oh, this is greater than Petty's, this is greater than this. Most of Petty's wins back in the day had 80 cars in the field. Minimum 60. Yes, there were some races where there was like 13, 15 on the entry list. And yes, there were races that Petty won where there's only 3 cars in the lead lap. Or 1 car lap down, vice versa, because the Pettys were in a time where they were building their own cars, so everybody else was just figuring it out, and that's the reason why there was a gap along Richard's talent. Kyle's, where he came into NASCAR and he was 16 years old, got thrown out of the truck series because he was 17, but he was doing really good for Roush. Then he had to sit that year in the sidelines to NASCAR racing, but he was racing ARCA for Rick Hendrick, came right back through the system. Then he got his truck wins with Billy Ballou, he got his first Xfinity win with Hendrick. I mean, then the Joe Gibbs switch, and with the competition you have now in the Cup Series, I feel like his Cup wins for his 53 are more impressive than maybe Gordon's. Not Gordon's, excuse me, Rusty Wallace's 50-something wins. I feel like that's more impressive in itself when you count the whole body of work. When it comes to different eras, Petty had to deal with Gordon at the very end. He had to deal with freaking Pearson. He had to deal with Waltrip. He had to deal with freaking, what's his name? He had to deal with AJ Foyt. He had to deal with Fireball Roberts. He had to deal with all those guys. Had to deal with his father Lee. Had to deal with Tiny Lund. Like, we're at the point of debating competition. Yes, there may be quote-unquote more competition now between race teams, but there's still a gap between money and disparities. And it's just different times. Most of the schedule back then was dirt tracks and converted asphalt tracks when Petty ran up until like the late 80s, when most of the NASCAR was asphalt, with the exception of North Wilkesboro. I mean, do we really want to go through everybody's catalog and try and see who was a great driver, who wasn't? In that case, we have to consider Sam Ard one of the greatest of all time. In that case, we have to consider David Green as one of the greatest of all time. We have to consider Jeff Green as a great. Like, where exactly does our consideration of people for great careers, if we have to count Kyle's, is the same as Richard's? Like, what do we have to do to even compare and contrast and just to do it accurately? My opinion on the matter is Kyle isn't the king. Yes, Kyle's had to deal with more tougher competition in the Cup Series, but the Truck and Xfinity Series is become a joke at this point. When you have a great driver, which Kyle is, and the best equipment, he wins most of those races rather easily. And the Truck Series, it's his trucks and basically are the God trucks, and that's it. So it's kind of easier for him to win there. But my thing is, if Kyle gets to like 100, 110, 115 wins in the Cup Series, somewhere around that range, along with his Xfinity and truck totals, then I think realistically he's the greatest of all time. When it comes to competition by wings and all this. But you have to say Kyle Busch, even if you decide to say I'm going to retire today, is a Hall of Famer because everything he did in the Xfinity and Truck Series plus the Cup Series, because his Cup wins are still one off Rusty Wallace. Hope to give you something to think about. Maybe a good argument for everybody who's not set on the Kyle Busch did this, Kyle Busch did this. I just want Kyle Busch to get over 100 wins in Cup. That way we can look at his accomplishments and say, okay, he's won 100 races in 2 different series. He's won over 50 in the trucks. Now you can have traction to say he's the greatest of all time, and it's actually logical. Because you can't really argue it nowadays. If a guy's only got 50 wins in Cup, you're saying he's the greatest of all time. You can't argue it. Not yet, at least. I'm happy that Kyle got his quote-unquote 200th. And yes, if that's rare in itself, you probably won't see that again. But at the same time, you have to try and put everything in perspective. Petty's is a Cup record, so you need to treat Kyle's as a Cup record. But you also need to have that spot in your mind for logic and appreciation of what he's done in the other series. Thank you so much for watching. This is another episode of the Shit Stir on Kyle Busch's career. If you want a California review, I might fuck around and do that later. Have a good day.